They say the most dangerous place in the world is between a Mafia don and his redemption. On a rainy Tuesday in Chicago, inside the city's most exclusive restaurant, a waitress was pouring a $500 bottle of Barolo for the most feared man in the underworld. He was there to make peace with his in-laws. But when the front door opened and a man in a wet trench coat stepped in, the waitress saw a tattoo on his wrist that stopped her heart. She had 3 seconds to make a choice: keep her mouth shut and watch them die, or whisper 2 words that would destroy her life forever. She chose to whisper. This is the story of how dinner turned into a war zone. Her name was Maya. If one were to check the employee records at Le Grand Soir, they would see she was hired 3 months ago as a junior server. Clean background check, valid social security number, no criminal record. That was because Maya didn't exist 4 years ago. She had spent the last few years scrubbing her past, keeping her head down, and trying to forget that she used to be an ER nurse who stitched up the wrong people in the back of a mechanic shop in Detroit. She thought she was safe in Chicago. Le Grand Soir was the kind of place where senators ate with mistresses and tech billionaires celebrated IPOs. It was quiet. It was safe. Until Titus Moretti walked in. Everyone knew the name. The papers called him a logistics consultant. The streets called him the architect. He ran the Moretti crime family with a terrifying level of corporate efficiency. But tonight, he wasn't wearing his armor. He was wearing a navy bespoke suit, looking less like a killer and more like a man walking to the gallows. He was holding the hand of his wife, Sophia. She was beautiful in a way that made one swore to look at her, fragile like spun glass. Behind them marched the in-laws Judge Arthur Sterling and his wife Eleanor. Judge Sterling was a hardliner. He had campaigned on cleaning up the city, yet here he was breaking bread with the man who ran it. The tension at table 4 was so thick one could choke on it. "Maya, take table 4, her manager Pierre hissed at her, wiping sweat from his upper lip. Pierre is indisposed. Do not mess this up. Mr. Moretti requested the 82 Margot. She took the decanter. Her hands were steady. They always were, but her stomach knotted. She walked over. "Arthur, please," Sophia was saying, her voice a hushed plead. "Enzo is trying. This dinner is about moving forward." Titus Moretti sat with his back to the wall, a classic power move, but also a survival instinct. He looked tired. "Your daughter is right, Arthur. The business is changing. I'm legitimizing the assets. By next year, the Moretti name will be clean." Judge Sterling scoffed, unfolding his napkin aggressively. "You don't wash blood out of money, Titus. You just dry it off. I'm only here because Sophia begged me." Maya stepped in, presenting the wine. "The 82 Margot, sir." Titus looked up. His eyes were dark intelligent and scanning everything. For a split second, he looked at her, assessing if she was a threat. Then he nodded. "Pour." She moved around the table. The air smelled of expensive truffle oil and expensive perfume, masking the scent of pure hatred radiating from the judge. That's when the bell above the entrance chimed. It was faint, barely audible over the jazz piano. But she looked up. Force of habit. A man walked in. He wasn't on the reservation list. He was wearing a heavy raincoat, dripping water onto the pristine marble floor. He didn't wait for the hostess. He just stood there, scanning the room. Pierre, the manager, stepped forward to stop him. The man in the raincoat placed a hand on Pierre's chest. It looked gentle, but Pierre crumbled, gasping for air, clutching his ribs. The man in the raincoat stepped into the light. Maya saw the tattoo peeking out from his cuff as he adjusted his collar. A black scorpion with a split tail. Her blood ran cold. She knew that tattoo. Back in Detroit, she had patched up a guy who had been tortured by a crew known as the Silence. They were cleaners. Contract killers hired when one wanted to wipe out an entire bloodline, not just one target. They didn't leave witnesses. The man reached into his coat. He wasn't reaching for a wallet. Maya looked at Titus. He was distracted arguing with Eleanor about school districts for children who didn't exist yet. He didn't see the man. He didn't see the death walking toward him. If she did nothing, she could drop the tray and dive into the kitchen. She might survive. If she warned him, she was involved. The man in the raincoat locked eyes with table 4. He started walking faster. A second man entered behind him, locking the front door. She was standing right behind Titus's left shoulder. She gripped the wine bottle so hard, she thought it would shatter. She leaned down, pretending to refill his water glass. Her lips were inches from his ear. 3 o'clock, she whispered, her voice trembling but clear. Scorpion tattoo. 2 shooters. Run now. Titus didn't flinch. He didn't turn his head to look at her. He didn't ask, "What?" He simply froze for a fraction of a second. The charm vanished. The husband vanished. The architect returned. Titus Moretti moved with a speed that defied physics. One moment he was holding a crystal stemware glass. The next he had kicked the heavy oak table upward. Crash. Plates, cutlery, and the $500 wine went flying. The heavy table flipped onto its side, creating a makeshift barricade between the family and the rest of the restaurant. "Get down!" Titus roared, his voice shaking the walls. Pop, 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 pop! The suppression fire started instantly. Bullets chewed into the wood of the table and shattered the mirror behind them. The sound was deafening, a high-pitched cracking that made ears ring. Screams erupted in the restaurant. Patrons were diving under booths. "My God, Arthur!" Eleanor screamed, clutching her husband. The judge looked paralyzed, his face pale, staring at the splintering wood inches from his nose. "Stay down," Titus commanded. He had a gun in his hand. Maya hadn't even seen him draw it. It was a compact Sig Sauer, pulled from a holster she hadn't noticed. He popped up over the rim of the table, fired 2 controlled shots, and ducked back down. Thud. Thud. "Sophia, keep your head down." Titus grabbed his wife by the back of her dress, pulling her closer to the floor. Maya was frozen, pressed flat against the carpet, smelling dust and old wine. She was exposed. The table protected them, but she was off to the side. Titus looked at her. His eyes were wild, fueled by adrenaline. He saw she was in the open. He lunged out from cover, grabbed her ankle, and dragged her behind the overturned table, just as a bullet pulverized the floor tile where her head had been a second ago. "Who are you?" he barked at her, checking the magazine of his gun. "Just a waitress," she yelled back. "Waitresses don't spot Sicario hit men from 30 feet away," he yelled. He looked at the judge. "Arthur, we need to move. The kitchen exit. Go." I can't." The judge was hyperventilating. Titus didn't plead. He grabbed the judge by his expensive lapels and shook him. "If you want to judge me, you have to be alive to do it. Move!" The shooting stopped for a second. They were reloading, or moving closer. "Go now," Titus shouted. They scrambled. They ran low, scuttling like crabs toward the swinging kitchen doors. Titus stayed behind, providing cover fire. Maya burst through the kitchen doors first. The chefs were gone. They had fled the moment the shooting started. Pots were boiling over on the stoves. A steak was sizzling, burning to charcoal. "Back exit," she shouted, pointing to the steel door at the far end of the prep line. Sophia was crying, dragging her mother. The judge was stumbling. They hit the alleyway. The cold Chicago air hit their sweat-drenched faces. It was raining hard. "The car!" Titus shouted, bursting through the door behind them. He had a cut on his forehead, blood streaming into his eye. "The SUV, around the corner." They ran. Maya's apron was tangled in her legs, so she ripped it off and threw it in a puddle. They reached a black Escalade, parked illegally near a dumpster. Titus mashed the key fob. The lights flashed. "Get in!" Judge Sterling. Eleanor and Sophia piled into the back. Titus jumped into the driver's seat. Maya stood there on the pavement, the rain soaking her uniform. She had saved them. She was done. She needed to run the other way, disappear, find a new city. Titus started the engine, then looked out the passenger window. He saw her standing there. "Get in," he yelled. "No, I'm not part of this," she screamed over the rain. "You are now," Titus shouted. "They saw your face, kid. You think the silence leaves loose ends." "You warned me. That makes you an accomplice. If you stay on this sidewalk, you're dead in 10 minutes. She looked down the alley. She could hear sirens in the distance, but she also heard the heavy boots of the hitmen kicking open the kitchen door. She didn't have a choice. She yanked the passenger door open and threw herself into the leather seat. Titus slammed on the gas. The Escalade screeched, fishtailing on the wet pavement, and roared out onto the main street, weaving through traffic. "Is everyone okay?" Titus asked, his eyes glued to the rearview mirror. "You animal!" Eleanor shrieked from the back seat. "You brought this on us. You promised." "I didn't order the hit, Eleanor," Titus snapped. He swerved to avoid a taxi. "Someone sold us out. Someone knew exactly where we'd be." He looked over at Maya. His face was grim. "And you," he said, his voice dropping an octave. "You're going to tell me exactly how you knew what that tattoo meant. And if I don't like the answer, I'll throw you out of this moving car." She looked at him. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by the cold, hard reality of her situation. She was in a getaway car with the head of the Moretti crime family, his hysterical in-laws, and a past she thought she had buried. "Drive Titus," she said, using his first name for the first time. "Just drive." The safe house wasn't a house at all. It was a decommissioned meat-packing plant in the slaughterhouse district miles away from the glitz of the city center. The Escalade tore through the rusted chain-link fence and skidded to a halt inside a loading bay that smelled of grease and old iron. "Everyone out, now!" Titus ordered, his voice tight with pain. He stumbled as he got out of the car. The cut on his head was bleeding profusely now, the adrenaline wearing off just enough to let the shock set in. Sophia was sobbing uncontrollably, clutching her mother's arm. Judge Sterling looked like he was about to vomit on his Italian leather shoes. "Where are we?" Eleanor demanded, her voice shrill. "This is a dump. I demand you take us to a hotel, Titus. A hotel is a morgue with room service, Eleanor," Titus snapped. He punched a code into a keypad on a heavy steel door. It hissed open, revealing a stark, sterile room lined with monitors, a cot and a metal table. "Get inside." Maya followed them in her mind, racing. She was trapped. If she tried to run now, she'd be alone in the industrial district in the middle of the night with a hit squad hunting her. Titus locked the heavy door behind them. He leaned against it, sliding down until he hit the floor. His face was grey. "Enzo," Sophia screamed, rushing to him, but hovering uselessly, afraid to touch the blood. "Oh my God, you're dying." "I'm not dying," he gritted out. "It's a scalp wound. Head wounds bleed a lot." But his eyes were losing focus. "He needs stitches," Maya said. Her voice was calm. It was the nurse voice. It just happened automatically. All eyes turned to her. The judge looked at her like she was a cockroach that had crawled out of the drain. "The waitress. You want the waitress to touch him. Do you have a better idea?" She shot back. She looked at Titus. "Do you have a first aid kit?" Titus pointed a shaky hand toward a cabinet on the wall. "Trauma kit. Bottom shelf." She didn't wait. She grabbed the kit. It was military-grade sutures, clotting agents, lidocaine scalpels. A criminal's first aid kit. "Help him onto the table," she ordered the judge. "I will not—" "Do it!" Titus roared, startling everyone. The judge and Eleanor awkwardly hoisted the heavy mob boss onto the metal table. Sophia stood in the corner, weeping into a handkerchief, utterly useless. Maya snapped on a pair of latex gloves from the kit. She cleaned the wound with iodine. Titus hissed but didn't pull away. He watched her with intense, narrowing eyes. "You have good hands," he murmured, his voice rough. "Hold still," she said. "I'm going to give you a local anesthetic, then I'm going to stitch this. It's deep, but no skull fracture." "Who are you?" he asked again. This time it wasn't an interrogation. It was genuine curiosity. "You handled that gunfight better than my own men." "I told you, I'm Maya." "Maya who? Does it matter?" She threaded the needle. "I'm the girl who just saved your life. That should be enough." She worked quickly. 6 stitches. Neat, tight, professional. She cleaned the blood from his face with a sterile pad. For a moment her hand lingered on his jawline. He was a dangerous man. A killer. But up close, stripped of the suit and the arrogance, he was intensely human. And he was looking at her with a heat that had nothing to do with the fever. "Done?" she said, stepping back and peeling off the gloves. Titus sat up, testing his head. He looked at Sophia, who was still crying. A flash of disappointment crossed his face before he masked it. Then he looked back at Maya. "You were a nurse," he stated. It wasn't a question. "ER," she admitted. "Detroit, Level 1 Trauma Center." "Why are you waiting tables in Chicago?" "Because in Detroit I saw something I wasn't supposed to see," she said quietly. "Just like tonight." The room went silent. The judge cleared his throat, regaining his composure now that the immediate danger had passed. "Well," the judge said, dusting off his jacket, "this is all very touching, but we need to resolve this. Titus, I have to call my chambers. If I don't check in by morning, the marshals will be alerted." "No phones!" Titus barked, hopping off the table. He stumbled slightly, and Maya instinctively reached out to steady him. He gripped her arm, his fingers strong. "Arthur, use your head. The silence knew exactly where we were. That means there is a leak. And until I know who it is, we are ghosts." "A leak?" Eleanor gasped. "You think one of us—" "No," Titus said, pacing the small room. "But someone close to us. Someone who knew the reservation. Only 4 people knew about tonight." He turned his gaze slowly to the judge. "Arthur," Titus said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Who did you tell?" The air in the bunker shifted. It went from chaotic to predatory. Titus Moretti wasn't the wounded victim anymore. He was the shark in the tank. Judge Arthur Sterling puffed out his chest, trying to summon the authority he wielded in the courtroom. "How dare you? I am a federal judge. I am the only reason you aren't currently serving 3 consecutive life sentences, Titus. Do not accuse me." "I'm not accusing," Titus said, walking closer to his father-in-law. "I'm asking, Did you tell your clerk, your driver, your mistress? Eleanor gasped. Mistress Arthur. Shut up, Eleanor. There is no mistress. The judge's face turned beet red. He looked at Titus. I told no one. I value my life, Titus. I know what happens to people who cross the Moretti family. Then how did they find us? Titus slammed his hand on the metal table, making Sophia jump. That reservation was under a fake name, the Rossi Party. It was made 2 hours before dinner from a burner phone. Maya stood in the corner, trying to be invisible, but her mind was working. She thought back to the restaurant, the way the hitmen entered. They didn't look around. They walked straight to the table. They knew exactly where the group was sitting. Titus, she said softly. He whipped his head around. What? It wasn't a verbal leak, she said. It was a signal. Explain, he demanded. The man in the raincoat, she said. He didn't check the reservation book. He didn't ask the hostess. He walked in and looked at his wrist. I thought he was looking at his watch or his tattoo. But he wasn't. She walked over to the pile of coats they had discarded on the floor. She picked up Sophia's expensive beige trench coat. He was checking a distance reading, she said. Someone is tracking us. That's impossible, Titus said. I sweep the cars daily. I sweep the house. It's not the car, she said. She patted down the pockets of Sophia's coat. Nothing. She checked the judge's coat. Nothing. Then she looked at the pile of purses. Sophia's handbag was a limited edition Birkin. Beautiful leather. She picked it up. Hey, put that down, Sophia snapped, finding her voice for the first time. That's private property. Maya ignored her. She dumped the contents onto the metal table. Lipstick, a compact mirror, a wallet, and a keychain with a heavy bedazzled charm shaped like a heart. She picked up the keychain. It felt heavy. Too heavy. Sophia, Titus said, his voice deadly calm. Where did you get this? Sophia's lip trembled. She looked from Titus to her father. It was a gift. From who? Titus asked. I don't know. It was in the mail last week. There was a card. It said it was from you, Enzo, for our anniversary. Titus's face went white. Our anniversary isn't for 2 months. Maya grabbed a scalpel from the medical kit and jammed it into the seam of the leather heart. Sophia shrieked, but Maya twisted the blade. The leather popped open. Inside, nestled in the cotton stuffing, was a black microchip blinking with a tiny red light. A GPS tracker, she said, holding it up. Active, transmitting right now. Titus stared at the device. The realization washed over him. He grabbed the tracker from her hand and threw it on the ground, smashing it with the heel of his boot until it was nothing but plastic dust. We have to move, Titus said, grabbing his gun. They know we're here. The signal just died, which means they know we found it. They'll be sending a cleanup crew. Who sent it, Sophia? Titus grabbed his wife by the shoulders. Who gave you the package? I told you it came to the house. The housekeeper brought it in. She was hysterical. The housekeeper, Titus muttered. Maria, she's been with us for 10 years. Money changes people, the judge said, looking relieved that he wasn't the traitor. Or threats. It's not just money, Titus said, his eyes darkening. This is Luca Vanzetti. The name hung in the air like a curse. Even Maya knew that name. Vanzetti was the rival Don of the South Side. Violent, erratic, and brutal. He had been trying to take over the Moretti territory for years. Vanzetti doesn't have the tech for this, Titus said, pacing again. He's a thug with a baseball bat, not a surveillance expert. He has a backer. Someone is funding a war against me. Suddenly the lights in the warehouse flickered, and died. Total darkness. "They're here," Maya whispered. "Get down," Titus hissed. They heard the screech of tires outside the loading bay. Not one car. 3. Heavy doors slamming. The sound of assault rifles being racked. "There's no back exit," Titus whispered to her. "This bunker was designed to keep people out, but if they breach the door, it's a tomb." "The ventilation shaft," she said. "I saw it when we came in, above the monitors." Titus looked up. It was small, too small for him or the judge, but big enough for Sophia and Eleanor. "Sophia, Mom, get up there," Titus ordered. "I'm not leaving you," Sophia cried. "You are—" Titus lifted her up. "Crawl to the roof. Hide. Do not come down until I come for you." He shoved Eleanor up next. That left Maya, Titus, and the judge. "What about her?" The judge pointed at her in the dark. Titus looked at Maya. "She stays. She can shoot." He pulled a spare magazine from his pocket and handed her a backup pistol, a Glock 19. "You know how to use this?" he asked. She checked the chamber. "Point and click right." He almost smiled. "Safety off. 2 hands. Don't miss." The heavy steel door of the bunker boomed. Someone was placing explosives on the hinges. "Arthur, get behind the desk," Titus ordered. The judge scrambled, looking like a terrified child. Titus and Maya took positions behind the overturned metal table. Their shoulders brushed. In the dark, waiting for the explosion, the tension was electric. "If we make it out of this," Titus whispered, "I'm giving you a raise." "If we make it out of this," she whispered back, "I'm quitting." Boom! The door blew inward in a shower of sparks and smoke. Silhouettes filled the doorway. Lasers cut through the dust. "Kill them all," a voice shouted from the smoke. It wasn't Vanzetti. It was a voice Titus recognized instantly. "That's my lieutenant," Titus whispered, his face twisting into pure rage. "Marco." It wasn't an outside war. It was a mutiny. Titus stood up and opened fire. The bunker dissolved into chaos. The air was thick with drywall dust and the acrid smell of cordite. Titus was a machine. He fired 3 shots in rapid succession, dropping the first man through the breach. But there were too many of them. Automatic gunfire chewed up the metal desk the judge was cowering behind. "Marco!" Titus roared over the noise, reloading his Sig Sauer. "You traitorous son of a bitch!" "It's just business, boss." Marco's voice echoed from the hallway, dripping with mock sympathy. "You wanted to go legit. You wanted to play golf with the judge. We're a crime family. Titus, not a country club. I'm just saving the family from your weakness." "I'll show you weakness." Titus leaned out and fired. Maya was huddled behind the overturned table, the Glock 19 heavy in her shaking hands. She had fired guns at a range in Detroit, part of the paranoia that came with running from a cartel, but never at a person. A figure in tactical gear flanked them on the right, trying to get a clear shot at Titus. He didn't see her. She didn't think. She didn't breathe. She just lifted the gun, aimed for the center of mass, and pulled the trigger. The gun bucked in her hand. The man jerked backward and collapsed. Titus looked at her, his eyes wide, for a fraction of a second. "Nice shot. Now move." "Where?" she screamed. "They're at the door." Titus looked at the back wall of the bunker. It was lined with heavy piping for the refrigeration units. "The ammonia line," Titus pointed. "If I shoot that this whole room fills with toxic gas in 10 seconds. "We don't have masks," she yelled. "We have shirts." Titus grabbed the judge by the collar, dragging him up. "Cover your face when I shoot. We run through the smoke straight into them. It's the last thing they'll expect." "You're insane," the judge shrieked. "On 3. Titus ignored him. 1, 2. Bang. Titus shot the yellow pipe. A hiss like a jet engine erupted as white clouds of anhydrous ammonia sprayed into the room. It was blinding and choking. "Go, go, go!" Titus charged, the door firing blind into the white fog. Maya grabbed the judge's arm and sprinted after him, burying her nose in her elbow. The gunmen at the door were coughing, blinded, their tactical goggles useless against the chemical fog. They plowed through them. Titus shoulder-checked a man into the doorframe, knocking the wind out of him. They burst out into the hallway of the meat-packing plant. The air here was clearer, but freezing cold. They were in the processing wing. "The kill floor," Titus panted, wiping his eyes. "We need to get to the kill floor. It's a maze. We can lose them there." They ran. The sound of heavy boots pursued them. Marco was shouting orders. "Cut off the exits. I want his head on a platter." They burst through a set of double plastic flaps into a cavernous room. It was terrifying. Hooks hung from ceiling chains on a motorized track. Stainless steel tables with drains were lined up in rows. Saws and cleavers hung on the walls. "Hide," Titus whispered. They ducked behind a massive industrial grinder. The judge was sobbing quietly. Titus clamped a hand over his mouth. "Arthur, if you make a sound, I will leave you here for them to carve up." The judge went silent, his eyes bulging. Titus checked his ammo. 2 rounds left. He looked at Maya. "Full mag," she whispered. She had only fired once. "Marco has at least 10 guys," Titus calculated. "We can't win a firefight." "Enzo!" Marco's voice boomed over the factory intercom system. He had made it to the control room. "Stop running. It's embarrassing. You know how this ends. You die, I take over, and the Moretti family goes back to being kings of Chicago. No more bowing down to judges." Titus looked around the room. His eyes landed on the power box on the far wall. "Maya," he whispered, "can you run fast? Try me. I need you to make a distraction. I'm going to flank them and kill the lights to the whole building, but I need them looking at you." "You want me to be bait?" she hissed. "I want you to trust me." He looked her dead in the eye. The connection was intense. In the middle of a slaughterhouse with death closing in, she felt a strange pull toward him. He wasn't just a boss. He was a leader. "Fine," she said, "but if I die, I'm haunting you." She took a deep breath. She stood up from behind the grinder and fired 3 shots into the air. "Over here, you assholes!" she screamed. Gunfire erupted immediately, pinging off the metal machinery around her. She sprinted low, sliding under a conveyor belt, moving toward the far side of the room. "There she is, get the girl." She saw 3 men moving toward her. She was trapped. She raised her gun, ready to take at least one with her. Suddenly, the hum of the factory died. The lights went out. The only light came from the moonlight filtering through the high skylights. Then the sound of the conveyor belt chains started up. Clank, clank, clank. Titus hadn't just killed the lights. He had turned on the machinery. Hooks swung through the darkness. The men screamed as heavy steel chains swung unexpectedly into them. Bang! Bang! 2 muzzle flashes from the dark. 2 bodies dropped. Titus was hunting. But then a spotlight from the catwalk above clicked on, pinning Titus in a circle of blinding light. "Gotcha," Marco said from the catwalk. He was holding a sniper rifle. Titus froze. He was exposed. Marco lined up the shot. "Say goodbye, boss." Maya didn't have a clear shot at Marco. He was too high up. She looked around frantically. Next to her was the control lever for the high-pressure steam cleaning system. She kicked the lever to max and aimed the nozzle upward. A jet of scalding hot steam blasted toward the catwalk. It didn't hit Marco, but the sudden cloud obscured his vision. Crack! His shot went wide, sparking off the concrete floor inches from Titus's foot. Titus dove into the shadows. "Damn it!" Marco yelled. "Find them! Sweep the floor!" Titus slid next to her in the dark. He was breathing hard. "We can't stay here," he said. "We need to get out." "What about Sophia and Eleanor?" she asked. "They're on the roof. They're safe for now. Marco thinks they're in the bunker, but we need backup to get them down." "Who can you call?" she asked. "Marco compromised your whole crew." Titus's face hardened. He looked like a man about to make a deal with the devil. "I have to call the only man in this city who hates Marco as much as I do right now." "Who?" "The man Marco framed for the hit," Titus said. "Luca Vanzetti." They retreated into the loading dock office, a small glass-walled cubicle overlooking the truck bay. It was defensible with only one door. Titus jammed a chair under the handle. Judge Sterling was slumped in the corner, clutching his chest. "I'm having a heart attack. I swear it." "Indigestion," Maya said, checking his pulse. "Your rate is 120, but steady. Breathe, Your Honor." Titus pulled a burner phone from his pocket, one he had lifted off the dead gunman Maya shot. He dialed a number from memory. "Who are you calling?" the judge wheezed. "Silence," Titus commanded. He put the phone on speaker. It rang 4 times. Then a gruff, gravelly voice answered. "Yeah, Luca," Titus said. There was a pause. "Moretti, you got some balls calling me. My boys tell me there's a hit squad hitting your safe house. I was just about to pop a bottle of champagne." "The hit squad isn't yours, Luca," Titus said calmly. "I know that. I didn't send them. But I'm enjoying the show." "It's Marco," Titus said. The line went silent. "Marco," Vanzetti repeated. "Your right hand." He turned. "He's trying to take the crown. And Luca, think about what happens if Marco wins tonight." Titus let that hang in the air. "Marco is a hothead," Vanzetti muttered. "He's reckless. He hits civilians. He brings heat." "Exactly," Titus said. "I'm trying to legitimize. I keep things quiet. The cops leave us alone because I give them peace. Marco wants war. He wants to expand into your territory, Luca. He told me himself. He wants the South Side." "He said that..." Vanzetti's voice dropped. "If I die tonight, Marco takes my army. And tomorrow morning that army is coming for you. You know I'm right." Maya watched Titus work. He was brilliant. He wasn't begging for help. He was selling a business proposition. "Where are you?" Vanzetti asked. "The old meat plant on 14th. I'm pinned down. Marco has 20 guys. Heavy weapons." "And what do I get if I bail you out?" Vanzetti asked. "I'm not a charity." "You get the shipping yards," Titus said, without hesitation. The judge gasped. "Titus, that's half your revenue." "Done," Vanzetti said instantly. "I have a crew 3 blocks away. We were watching the fireworks. We'll be there in 5. Titus hung up. He looked exhausted. "You just gave away the shipping yards?" the judge asked, incredulous. "To Vanzetti, he's a butcher." "I gave away nothing," Titus said, checking his gun. "I gave him a promise. If we survive this, I'll figure out how to deal with Vanzetti. But right now I need guns. He might just come here and kill us both," Maya pointed out. "Then he gets the yards and the territory." "He might," Titus admitted, looking at her. But Vanzetti honors deals. It's the old school code. Marco broke the code. That offends Vanzetti more than anything. Suddenly the glass of the office shattered. A bullet whizzed past Maya's ear. "They found us!" Titus yelled, flipping the heavy metal desk over. They dove behind it. Marco was standing on the loading dock floor, flanked by 5 men. He was smiling. "Come out, Enzo!" Marco shouted. "I know you're in there. No more tricks, no more steam. Just a bullet in the brain." "Check your watch, Marco," Titus shouted back. "What? Check your watch, you're on borrowed time." Marco laughed. "You're delusional." He signaled his men. "Breach the room." The men advanced. Maya gripped her gun. She had 5 bullets left. Titus had 1. The men reached the door. They kicked it. The chair jammed it. They kicked again. The wood splintered. "This is it," Titus whispered. He reached out and took her hand. His palm was rough, warm. "Maya, you did good. You shouldn't have been here." "I picked a hell of a night to pick up an extra shift," she managed to joke, though tears were stinging her eyes. The door flew open. Marco stepped into the doorway, his gun raised. "Goodbye, boss." Scrack. Tires squealed outside. Bright headlights flooded the loading bay, blinding Marco from behind. A black van smashed through the rolling garage door, sending metal flying. The side door of the van slid open. 4 men with Tommy guns, actual old-school Thompson submachine guns, leaned out. "Vanzetti sends his regards," one of them shouted. "Tat, tat, 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 tat." The noise was deafening. Marco's men were cut down in seconds. Marco dove behind a forklift, screaming in rage. "It's Vanzetti," Marco yelled. "Kill them!" A full-scale war erupted on the loading dock floor. The Vanzetti crew poured out of the van. The Moretti mutineers fired back from the catwalks. "Now!" Titus yelled. "We move the roof." They scrambled out of the office, while the 2 factions tore each other apart. They sprinted for the maintenance ladder that led to the roof access. They climbed. Maya's lungs were burning. The judge was struggling, wheezing, his face purple. Titus practically threw him up the last few rungs. They burst onto the roof. The rain was pouring down, washing away the blood on their clothes. "Sophia Eleanor!" Titus shouted. There was no answer. The roof was a vast expanse of tar and gravel, dotted with AC units. "Sophia!" They ran toward the center. Then Maya stopped. Titus stopped. Standing near the edge of the roof was a helicopter. It was black sleek, and the rotors were spinning. But it wasn't a rescue chopper. Standing by the open door was a man in a raincoat. The same man from the restaurant. The scorpion tattoo. And he was holding Sophia by her hair. Eleanor was on her knees, a gun pressed to her head. The man smiled. He didn't look worried about the war downstairs. "Mr. Moretti," the man said. His voice was accented. Russian number Serbian. "You are very hard to kill. The client is becoming impatient." "Let them go," Titus said, stepping forward. "This is between you and me." "No," the man said. "The contract was for the family. The suffering is the point." Titus raised his gun. It was empty. He threw it down in frustration. "Who is the client?" Titus demanded. "Marco doesn't have the money for a Serbian hit squad. Who are you working for?" The man smiled. "Marco, no. Marco is a useful idiot. He provided the access. But the money comes from someone much closer to you." The man looked at Judge Sterling. Titus froze. He turned slowly to look at his father-in-law. The judge was standing there, panting. He wasn't cowering anymore. He stood up straight. He adjusted his wet tie. "I'm sorry, Titus," the judge said, his voice cold and steady. "But you were never going to legitimize fast enough. My polls are down. I need a win on crime. And nothing looks better for a judge than being the sole survivor of a mob war that wiped out the Moretti family." Titus stared at him. You set this up? You put a hit on your own daughter." "Sophia was collateral damage. I tried to avoid," the judge said with a shrug. "I tried to get her to leave you. She wouldn't listen. Now she dies a martyr. And I become the mayor." The judge looked at the Serbian hitman. "Kill them. Kill them all. And let's go." The rain lashed against the roof of the meat-packing plant, a cold, relentless sheet that blurred the line between the ski and the dark industrial horizon. The air was thick with the smell of tar ozone and the metallic tang of blood. Titus Moretti stood in the center of the rooftop, his silhouette illuminated by the flickering red warning lights of the ventilation system. He looked like a man who had already died once tonight and was simply waiting for the paperwork to go through. His navy suit was shredded at the shoulder, soaked through with a mixture of rain and the blood from his scalp wound. Standing 20 feet away near the spinning rotors of a black Augusta Westland helicopter was the man with the scorpion tattoo, the Serbian mercenary. He held Sophia by the arm, the barrel of a suppressed pistol pressed firmly into the hollow beneath her ear. Eleanor was slumped on the gravel nearby, her expensive silk dress, ruined, her eyes glazed over with a shock so deep she couldn't even scream. But it was the third man who commanded the most terror. Judge Arthur Sterling wasn't cowering anymore. He stood tall, his chest puffed out, a bizarre, manic energy radiating from him. He held a high-end encrypted radio in one hand and a silver flask in the other. "It's a beautiful night for a tragedy, isn't it, Titus?" the judge shouted over the wind. "The headlines are already written in my head. Heroic judge survives mob ambush, family lost in tragic crossfire. I'll be the most sympathetic man in America. I'll be untouchable." Titus didn't move. His eyes weren't on the judge. They were on Sophia. "Arthur, let her go. She's your blood. You can't live with this. No amount of political power can drown out the sound of your daughter's last breath." "Oh, don't lecture me on morality, you gutter rat!" Sterling roared, his face twisting into a mask of pure hatred. "I spent 30 years building a reputation while you spent 10, dragging my daughter through the mud of your business. You think I wanted this? I wanted a son-in-law who was a senator, not a man who keeps a body disposal expert on speed dial." The Serbian hitman adjusted his grip on Sophia. "The fuel is burning, Judge. We leave in 60 seconds, with or without the targets eliminated." "Do it," Sterling commanded, turning his back as if he couldn't bear to watch, though the cowardice was likely just a way to claim plausible deniability in his own mind. The Serbian narrowed his eyes, his finger tightening on the trigger. Click. The sound was hollow, pathetic, a mechanical failure that felt like a thunderclap in the silence of the rooftop. The hitman's brow furrowed. He cleared the chamber a live round, spinning out onto the gravel, and pulled the trigger again. Click. "What is this?" the hitman hissed in Serbian. "It's called a firing pin," Maya said, stepping out from behind a massive industrial HVAC unit. She held a small, oily piece of metal between her thumb and forefinger. Or rather, the lack of one. Every head on that roof whipped toward her. She stood there, the rain soaking her waitress uniform, looking like the least dangerous person in Chicago. but she was holding the heart of the hitman's weapon. Maya. Titus breathed his voice a mix of confusion and sudden hope. The name is Carla, she said, her voice cutting through the wind like a blade. She looked directly at Judge Sterling. And you really should check the resumes of the people you hire to serve your soup, Arthur. The judge stared at her, his eyes squinting through the rain. Who are you? 5 years ago, a man named Mikhail Petrov was convicted of running an illegal pharmacy for the Detroit mob, she said, stepping closer. The evidence was planted, the witnesses were coerced, and the judge who signed the warrant, the judge who took a $200,000 consultation fee from the Vanzetti family to make sure my father died in a cell, was you. The judge's face went from pale to ghostly white. Petrov. That was a closed case. He was a criminal. He was a healer, she snapped. And I've spent every day since his funeral becoming the ghost that would haunt you. I didn't just happen to be working at Le Grand Soir tonight. I've been tracking your movements for 18 months. I knew you were meeting Titus tonight. I knew you were planning something because you've been liquidating your offshore accounts for weeks to pay for this silence crew. She looked at the Serbian hitman, who was reaching for a combat knife in a tactical sheath on his thigh. Don't, she warned, lifting the Glock 19 she had taken from the office downstairs. I'm a much better shot than I am a waitress. Titus didn't wait for another word. He knew this was his only window. With a roar of pure primal rage, he launched himself at the hitman. The two men collided like two freight trains. The hitman was younger and stronger, but Titus was fueled by the betrayal of his family and the survival instinct of a man who had been hunted since he was 19. They rolled across the gravel, a blur of navy wool and black tactical gear. Titus grabbed the hitman's wrist, slamming it against the edge of a raised skylight until the knife clattered away. He then delivered a brutal short-arc elbow to the man's temple. The Serbian slumped his eyes, rolling back, as Titus pinned him down his hands, finding the man's throat. Titus! Stop! She shouted. If you kill him, you're exactly what the judge wants you to be. Titus froze his chest. Heaving, his fingers dug deep into the hitman's neck. He looked up at her, his face covered in blood and rain, looking truly like the monster the world believed him to be. Then slowly he released his grip. He stood up, shaking, and walked over to Sophia. He gathered his unconscious wife in his arms, shielding her from the rain. Meanwhile, Judge Sterling was backing away toward Theo. Theo wore the edge of the roof, his eyes darting around like a trapped animal. You have nothing. It's my word against yours. I'm a pillar of this community. You're a corpse who hasn't stopped talking yet, she said, lowering her gun but keeping her eyes locked on him. I have the police in my pocket, Sterling screamed, his voice cracking. I'll have you both executed before the sun comes up. Actually, Arthur. Titus said, his voice terrifyingly calm as he stepped forward. You should have checked the waitress's other pocket. She reached into her apron and pulled out a small, professional-grade digital recorder. It was linked to the restaurant's wireless mic system she had hidden under the table back at Le Grand Soir, and it had been streaming to a cloud server since the moment the first course was served. Everything, she said. The hit, the betrayal, your confession about Sophia, the bribe you took in Detroit. It's all been live streaming to a secure server at the FBI's field office. As if on cue, the horizon erupted in a symphony of blue and red. The sirens were low at first, then deafening. The thump, thump, thump of federal helicopters began to shake the very building they stood on. Sterling looked at the lights, then at the recording device in her hand. His world, 30 years in the making, vanished in a heartbeat. "I can't go to prison," he whispered. "I know what they do to judges in the general population." "Then you should have thought about that before you sent my father there," she said. The judge looked at the edge of the roof. It was a long way down to the concrete of the slaughterhouse district. He looked at Titus, who was holding Sophia, and then at Carla. For a second, she saw the man. He could have been a man of law before the greed had rotted him out. He took a step back. "Arthur, don't!" Titus shouted, reaching out a hand. But the judge didn't want mercy. He took one more step. His eyes fixed on the sky and disappeared into the dark. There was no scream, just the sound of the wind. The FBI arrived 3 minutes later. They found Carla sitting on an AC unit, smoking a cigarette she'd lifted from the hitman's pocket. Titus was sitting on the gravel, Sophia's head in his lap, Eleanor weeping into his shoulder. They didn't arrest them. Not at first. There were too many questions, too many bodies, and too much evidence provided by a waitress who knew exactly where the bodies were buried, literally. 3 months later, the dust had settled. Titus Moretti had made a deal. He gave up the entire Vanzetti hierarchy and the corrupt remains of his own family in exchange for immunity and a new life for Sophia and Eleanor. They were relocated to a small town in Oregon, living under names that sounded like they belonged in a Hallmark movie. Carla didn't go with them. She didn't want a new life provided by the government. She was standing on the deck of a ferry in Seattle, watching the rain hit the water, when a man in a tan trench coat stepped up beside her. He didn't look like a mob boss anymore. He looked like a tired father on a weekend trip. "You're hard to find, Carla," Titus said, looking out at the sound. "That's the point," she replied. He handed her an envelope. It was thick. "A gift from Sophia. She wanted you to have your own practice one day, a real one, no back-alley stitches." She took the envelope. "How are they?" "Safe," he said. "Sophia still has nightmares about the rain, but she's smiling again. Eleanor is, Eleanor. She complains about the local coffee." He turned to leave, then paused. "Why did you save us?" "You had the judge right where you wanted him. You could have let the hitman finish us and then just killed the judge. You would have had your revenge and no witnesses." She looked at the water. "My father was a doctor, Titus. He taught me that your job is to save the life in front of you, no matter whose life it is. I didn't save a mob boss. I saved a husband. And I didn't kill a judge. I let a coward face himself." Titus nodded, a small, genuine smile touching his lips. "You're a good woman, Carla Petrov. Try not to get hired at any more Italian restaurants. Try not to get shot at for dinner," she teased. He walked away into the fog, and for the first time in 5 years, she felt the weight lift off her shoulders. She wasn't a waitress, a nurse, or a ghost anymore. She was just herself, and the horizon was wide open. Narrator. They say you can't choose your family, but you can certainly choose who you survive with. Titus Moretti is gone, disappeared into the shadows of the Witness Protection Program. Judge Sterling is facing life in a federal penitentiary. And as for Maya or Carla, she's somewhere where the wine is cheap and nobody knows her name. But in the world of the Mafia, no story ever truly ends. There are always whispers, always debts to be paid, and always someone watching from the shadows. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the dark heart of the Chicago underworld, make sure to hit the like button and share this video with someone who loves a good twist. Most importantly, subscribe to our channel and turn on the bell icon. We have more stories of betrayal romance and high-stakes drama coming your way every week. What would you have done in Maya's shoes? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching.